Very glad to be back with you. I'm here with Johnny, as always.
Yeah, good to be here. I know we've been busy, and like we tell everybody, we'll come in when we can and give them updates. And here we are. We've got an update for them.
Absolutely, we have. And, we want to welcome back Andy from TFM onto the podcast. Hey, Andy.
Hey, it's good to be back, and I'm sure we have a lot to talk about, so...
Yeah, so it's been a little while since we spoke about TFM on the podcast and had one of the TFM developers on, but there's been a pretty big update recently, mainly with regard to the ILS system, but I'll of course leave that mainly for Andy to talk about. So I don't know where we want to start, and maybe Andy, you just want to give us a rundown and the ILS changes and how this could benefit people.
Okay, so in version 22.5, I had done a complete rewrite of the ILS system that is in previous versions of TFM. So previous versions of TFM would give you percentages on the localizer, so 20% left or 18% right, for an example, and the same thing with percentages on the Glideslope. So you will hear 50% up or 20% down. So what does a percentage mean to a pilot in general, especially BVI pilot? Doesn't really mean anything because you can't tell where the Glideslope is, you can't tell where the localizer is. So I undertook rewriting the ILS system and came up with a solution to the problem. So in the new version, the localizer needle will give you headings, and the Glideslope indicator will give you altitudes. So an example for the localizer would be 55 left. It would mean your target is 55 degrees to the left of you. Same thing with 15 degrees to the right. Your target is 15 degrees to the right of you. And in the case of Glideslope, it has up and down indicators. So 1,000 down would mean it is 1,000 foot below you, which means you should go down 1,000 feet. And 1,500 up means it's above you 1,500 feet. And that's the basic overall on what it will do. So how it works. You, first of all, when you get done, if you're in PMDG airplane, you would set up your route and your FMC and your aircraft as usual. If you're flying offline, once you get done with that before you take off, you press right bracket, D as in Delta. Or, I'm sorry, right bracket, Control D is in Delta, and it will bring up a destination runway form. Now at the moment, this form will only give localizer-based and ILS-based runways. So in the form, you would put in the airport code, press enter, it will load the runways. You can go to the runways list, choose the one that you want, and in deciding which one you want, if you go to the ILS details field, it will give you things like name and ID. It will give you distance from your current location to the runway, both in feet and nautical miles. It will give you the glide slope angle, the frequency that you need to tune, and it will give you the ILS heading or course 1/2 that you need to put into your Nav1 system. Once you do that, and it comes time to turn on approach mode, then the new system will become active, and all you need to do is respond with commands to your airplane based on what you need to do to get on the localizer and the glide slope. That's basically what the new ILS setup is.
Now, I'll say that, Deck, I don't know if you've tried it yet, I did do a manual landing. Now I'm not going to say it was perfect, like it was that I just perfectly landed it. It took me a little bit of moving, left and back right and back left, but that was because of wind and stuff like that, weather. But it definitely gives us the ability to have more control in, how we're going to do our landing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching it in action yesterday, and it's really great to have some more realistic values so that we actually know what's going on. Those who are on Bat Simulon will know that when you're getting cleared for these approaches, and you're hearing 99% a lot of the time when it's still waiting to come in, you're really concerned about whether it's going to come in, and you're concerned about whether the controller has put you on a good heading to intercept. But with this, you can hear exactly how many degrees you are off and things, and exactly where it is in relation to you. And you can really get a sense of what's happening. You can tell, okay, we're going to be establishing from the right, and we've got about 30 degrees turn to make, and then little things like that make it a lot smoother. And like Johnny was saying, the hand flying. These airplanes are complex to hand fly. It's kind of like flying imagine driving a car that's got really slow response times, or maybe even a big truck. These things are big, heavy aircraft a lot of the time, and it takes a hell of a lot of time. I think it's going to take us some time, to be honest, to get used to being able to hand fly them. Because I was watching, up on the server with Marshall and him doing it. Unfortunately, I can't fly at the moment since I don't have the means. Out at college, and he was struggling, because it's just. It's a really difficult thing to get your head around, so it's going to take time, but the fact we can start to learn hand flying is a really great part of PMDG we haven't explored. What I will point out to people is, and Andy, you can chip in on this, is about the blog, if people want to see this in a written format.
Yes, so if you go to talkingflightmonitor.com/blog, we released the blog about 2 weeks ago, and there will be release announcements, developer updates, hopefully on a frequency of once or twice a week, on the status of TFM. That is mainly where there is detailed discussion from our part on development and release notes and things like that. Where you find the release notes on the download page, those are just bullet points of what's going on, and there will always be a link to the blog post that talks about those if there happens to be one. So like hot fixes and things, if they're not very big hot fixes, there will not be a blog post, but it will reference the blog post that introduced those features. So those features, the ILS system, and a couple of other things that we're probably going to get to here pretty soon, are in the blog post developer update 5.12/2022. It's right on the homepage for the blog, so it's easy to find.
Yeah, and you guys can just go there instead of, I got to go here, go there. It's a simple website. It's you go there and you get the information that you need, and it just makes it easy because you don't got to go to 3 different spots to try to figure out what's going on. And I'm going to clear something up about that too. We've got the WhatsApp thing, but guys, that's for verbal discussion. It's not for, Declan came up with something and he's going to put everything on WhatsApp about it. Like, if it's detail, it makes sense to go into a blog. To me, it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's no real way on WhatsApp to mark messages as important or anything like that. So unfortunately, what happens is with a lot of the BVI groups is they get they get spammed with people asking for help and discussion, and that's what they're there for, and that's great. But it just means that people might not want to go back and listen to 50 messages. And the same with YouTube videos and streams. I mean, the podcast's always going to be here, all that good stuff. And if you want the in-depth talk about stuff, then that's kind of the place to go. But if you're not, there might be people who aren't aware of YouTube channels or the podcast, and we obviously want to make them aware. But if they're not aware, you can get a brief breakdown of everything on the blog, and it also helps, I guess, for people who might have other issues, and perhaps maybe they have hearing difficulties or whatever, and listening to these kind of things can be more trouble than it's worth, and so perhaps, I don't know, they use a braille display, so they want to read it in text format. There's all sorts of user cases where maybe textual is better, so
yeah,
it's good we've got that.
It makes it better to be able to go back and just have that, maybe you forgot something, go back and read it. The other thing I was going to bring up that's someone asked me about it a couple of weeks ago, and they said, well, what did that mean when it would say 99%, 88%? I believe the idea is it was technically a visual thing converted to a reference to be able to try to at least give us a little information on what was going on, but it really didn't tell us much, did it? So, could visually a pilot can look and see that percentage and where it's at, and when it's center, gets on this center line and connects, but it didn't tell us really a whole lot. Just it would give us percentiles, and that was it. So, unless I'm wrong, you can correct me on that if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think the idea was trying to make it where it was at least understandable from a perspective, from BBI perspective, because naturally it was a visual element and not a percentage for a sighted pilot. So that's why we're kind of like, it's confusing.
Yeah, so the Nav1 radios, there's two segments of them. One is a localizer needle, which moves in the old analog systems. It was
logged onto the server.
It was like a car's gas gauge from like 50s and 60s.
Folder view list RS games
it would move from the left to the right. And
normal cursor.
Usually, as far as the gas gauge goes, to the far left was empty.
Edit protected
far right was full. Well, on the localizer,
27.2.4, 64-bit Windows Pro BBI Pilots Podcast,
of the runway heading, neutral position is in the center of the display. Now, if the needle points to the left, it means your target's too far to the left of you, so you need to turn left. And same thing to the right. While the old analog gauges didn't necessarily give you any markers or percentages or anything, it was a rough eyeball
Right.
type of thing.
Right.
And the newer digital glass cockpit gauges, what it'll do is it will give you heading and an arrow that points to the left or an arrow that points to the right. So you may have 55 and then a left arrow, or 55 and a right arrow.
Right. Right.
That way you know what direction you need to turn. It's the same thing with Glideslope, but it's the localizer needle flipped on its side. It floats up and down in the case of the old ones. And in the new ones, it gives you a number like 3000. It'll have a up arrow pointing up or a down arrow pointing down, depending on what direction the Glideslope is from you. And we wanted to try and mimic those newer style gauges. So we actually totally abandoned the gauge itself, reading the gauge itself in the new system. And it's all calculated based off the current airplane's position and the glide slope and the localizer's position. But yeah, the old system was more or less a makeshift way to be able to somehow get out in audible format where this thing is located at and how far you have to go.
Yeah. And just to let you guys know, and if I had to turn it off, I will if it gets with silly questions or anything like that. Do not start flooding the restream chat here. But if you got a question, you can throw it in there, and I'll ask it. But no stupid questions, okay? Common sense here. Okay. Well, I'll just turn off restream and we'll just go on about our day and not worry about it. So it's open if anybody wants to ask questions while we're talking. So
one question we had, Andy, that I've heard about, and I mean, this is something that, you know, is more speculation, so I should caveat it with that. But how do you think it would work if we were to try and apply this to non-ILS runways? Is that something that you're looking at for the future?
So the non-ILS runways, I am looking into how we can somehow do that. I can now calculate the distance between the airport, or calculate the distance between the foot of the runway and your current aircraft. Now, I can say, do the same thing. What is the difference between your current heading and the runway heading that you're supposed to be pointed at to land? And the only other issue would be as a guidance system to take you down on your vertical descent. So I'd have to work on that and try and figure out what I'm going to do with that one. But we are researching it, looking into it, experimenting around. And this new ILS system, you know, yeah, it was needed, but it's also a proof of concept idea for the non-ILS based runways.
yeah, and I know that you can, you know, one way that a pilot will also figure out kind of distance on when landing is you know, they'll use some mathematics. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but they take their descent and with the length distance between them and the runway, and that will give them
descent path, yeah.
Yeah, descent path of like,
descent path.
you know, like 800 feet a minute, you know, going down, and that'll put them. So I think that it's something promising, and it'd be nice, because I know me and Declan and some others have talked about wanting to be able to do that, where maybe we can't do an ILS, you know, and a controller will say, you know, well, you know, can you take this runway, you know, and then we'd be able to do that, and I think that's huge to be able to say, yeah, we'll take runway 7 with you know, something that normally would be visual.
Yeah, and it's stepping, you know, TFM is stepping all the BVI pilots up to the sighted world. We're bringing the sighted world to us, whichever way you want to look at it, but it is becoming a point, especially on VATSIM, where you don't care what they hand you, you can just take it and go with it. So they say, well, here's an ILS, yeah, oh yeah, I know I can take that, or here's a VDD, visual type of thing, there's no landing system to help you, oh yeah, I can take that, no problem. And it makes people feel good, it's really cool, you know, you don't have to think about accessibility or what am I going to do or what kind of workaround do I have to use.
Yeah, exactly.
You just take it and run with it like anyone else.
Now there are, I mean, I know there's not like a whole bunch of updates that's been done on this version, but the just to let people know that the settings have been fixed as well, right? Am I right about that?
So the settings, so there was a well-known long-standing issue where in the PMDG section of TFM Settings, the radio button to decide what type of soft key layout for the FMC you wanted to use would not save. And we figured out that sucker, and it works now.
Yeah, that makes it nice.
Yeah, that's good to know. And yeah, like we were saying, I think people should be really excited about the future of TFM, and the ability to fly non-ILS approaches will open up something really cool, because they do give a lot of visuals in the US, and we all know the good old RNAV and VOR DME approaches and these kind of things, where it's kind of a bit of a, well, we're going to just hope for the best and just hope we don't crash, because we don't really know what it's going to do. And there's no auto land, so if we can just take over, eventually, then that will really be a great new feature that takes us closer to being to the cider pilots, and in some ways actually past the cider pilots. Because you know what, if we're on VATSIM and they say, there's a cloud layer, you can't do a visual, we can say, well, actually we can do a visual, because TFM can give us the data even though we can't see the damn runway, so don't worry about it.
TFM sees the runway.
Yeah, like when they say, look, they'll be like, well, sorry, there's zero visibility. Be like, oh no, we got 100% visibility. We're good.
I can see the runway from 5 miles away.
Well, the other interesting thing about this too, Declan, and I'm sure you thought about this, because we've got some new pilots in the BVI community. I think this new ILS will help them more than hurt.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of people who've had issues with intercepting in the past, and it's always been the thing, well, when do I turn on approach mode? It's saying 99%, what does this mean? Now, if people can actually see the situation, it'll be a lot easier to diagnose, okay, I was too high, or things like this, and it really gives a better picture of where you are in relation to the glide. I mean, you could even take it on heading select mode in the PMDG, and if you know that you're too far to one side from TFM, if you know that you're 50 degrees off, you can dial in a new heading 50 degrees to the other side, and manually try and intercept the glide and the localizer, because you've got that info now to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's how I did when I said that I landed like completely when I did the hand landing. It was so heavy because you were talking about how it's a lot different, you guys, trying to hand land a 737. Okay, I know some might say, oh well, that's really not that difficult. Well, when you do it, then tell us that it's not difficult, because you really feel the weight of that jet when you're doing it hand, completely manual. And so I went to where I was on autopilot, but my heading, I had it set to heading, so I was putting in the heading, and that does work out beautifully, because it said like 30 degree to the left. I just changed my heading and bam, caught it. So it made it a lot easier.
So now
But yeah, hand flying these things is difficult. It's difficult to keep them level or anything, so just be aware of that.
It is, yeah, because, well, Marshall, you tried too, didn't you? And the thing I noticed is like it's up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yep.
Because you got the wind, you guys. You got the wind that's throwing you around, and someone had said, well, the wind don't throw you that much. Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Don't tell me it doesn't, because I know it does.
This is not like Eurofly when you're hand flying, where it's like, you're in something that feels like it's on rails or like a paper plane. You can really feel the forces on this thing, and it seems like you've really got to, if you get it too far off to one side, it's difficult to recover. So you've got to really be careful. It's like I said, it's like a heavy truck, trying to get it around a corner. You've got to kind of anticipate earlier what it's going to do, and it's difficult.
we don't get the bumper rails for bowling people. If we go when we go manual, it's not that easy. So, not that it can't be done, and really skilled out, because it can be. But like Marshall said, you'll just have to do it yourself, and you'll see what we're talking about. That's really the only way to really get what we're saying there.
Yeah, but now, even if you try a hand landing and fail, now you know why.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least you can sit there and look at things and try to figure out why and you have the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because before you didn't have the numbers, you just had percentages. Well, I don't know what 99% left, 99% left. I mean, like for 10 minutes, really?
Yeah, it will not surprise me later on if someone, not necessarily one of us here already, like one of us, but it would not surprise me that if someone later down the road doesn't say, hey, can we get a you know how like the landing has that beeping thing that beeps when you go too far left, too far right. I can see someone asking for a beeper. Like, can we get a beeper so we can line up? Like, it's easy to do. You're not going to need a beeper. I'm being sarcastic, but it would not surprise me if that's not requested in the future. I'm dead serious. I bet you it will be. Someone's going to ask for a beeping coordination or something.
Like the runway guidance mode?
Yeah, like in a beep. Like when you get dead on, it'll give you like a solid beep. You
got the headings, just read it,
Exactly.
It constantly tells you all the time what the heading is.
Yeah.
As worth a note here, the old system is still available. So to turn on the new system, because it's always turned off by default.
I don't want the old system. They can have it.
And once you turn the settings on, they will save. So to turn them on, go to TFM Settings, go to Aircraft, tab around there. There's two check boxes. One, read localizer headings. Two, read Glideslope altitudes. Check those boxes. Hit OK, and you'll be good to go. And do not forget to fill out the destination runway form. I did that once and wanted to know why in the world is this thing not working right. Something had to have went wrong somewhere. No, I never filled out the form. So TFM didn't know what I was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So do not forget to fill out that form.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you have to change the form at any time, I'm guessing you have free license to go in and change things until the approach.
Yes, so you can use it to look up runways and what their codes and headings and things like that are. You can look at anything you want to and hit cancel, and it will revert back to what you had previously saved. Now, it's one thing to note too, if you filled the form out and bring it up again, it will retain your current settings, so it will display the airport code, the runway you chose, and the ILS info for that particular runway, just as future reference, because if you're like, oh no, I don't remember what the code is or what the frequency is, to put in this and you're like hurrying up because you're at like 9,000 feet and you need to drop it in really quick, just reopen the form and take a look. As a cool side note, here, that NILS info box will also tell you how far from the runway you are. I think I mentioned that once, but it comes in handy when you're coming upon final approach, because if you look in there and see how many feet you have left to the foot of the runway, then you know how much room you're looking at.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes if you do right bracket D for distance to airport or distance to destination, it might tell you 25 miles, but that might not always be right, because it's calculated based on the miles that you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's also calculated based on a straight line. It may not necessarily be the truth.
Well, it was interesting. I did a flight last night over to Phoenix, and it was 7 left I was going for. I had the frequency, I had the course, but I never got anything about a glide slope. Now that might be because maybe I need to do my runways again, make runways. I don't know, but I couldn't even get the approach to even come on, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, RNAV, VNAV was on, LNAV was on.
Slope reading.
No, I didn't get. Well, I couldn't even get approach to come on at all. you hit Control A, but I always thought that the only time that doesn't come on is if you don't have on like your VNAV or something like that that's off would stop approach from coming on. I thought, but it wouldn't even come on. So I don't know if it's just a runway situation or what it was.
I mean, one note worth saying with this is that sometimes you'll notice it kind of resets itself, where you'll be hearing the the general information. So your feet and heading, and then sometimes you'll hear it say Nav1 has Glideslope again.
Yeah.
As though you've just picked it back up, and that, like Andy was saying, I believe in one of the groups yesterday, seems to be if you lose it for a second and then it comes back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me, because when it will say something like Nav1 has Glideslope is live, runway heading XYZ, and it's always the same runway heading. So I'm thinking, like, as you're going through your waypoints in your flight plan and the plane is turning left, you're turning right there, you are temporarily falling off of the path.
Well, yeah, because
for the glide slope, because really you need to be paying attention to the glide slope and the localizer's position when you turn onto final.
Exactly, and I've seen that too, because like if you got a waypoint that's got a heading of let's say 320, and the course is 70, well, you're going to fall off of it because you're turning completely away from it. You're going the other direction away from it. So it would make sense to follow that. I'm thinking, as long as you follow that course heading, that should line you up, wouldn't it? I mean, generally speaking.
Well, the thing is if you have a star, and I tested this idea out a couple of times yesterday. If you have a star, you are, unless you put on flight level change mode or totally do what ATC says, cancel the star and just drop down to your intercept altitude. You still have to fly the star, you have to fly the waypoints, because once that localizer or glide slope becomes alive and you turn heading to course whatever the localizer tells you to do for the runway, it will turn approach mode off and your plane will go off into the wilderness with no return.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's a good
you
thing
have
to remember.
You have to follow the star unless you put in flight level change mode, which deviates totally from your flight path. You still have to follow the runway's headings, but your descent path is not required as far as the stars and the altitudes. Once you turn on to final, which is probably the second to the last waypoint, so 2 waypoints before the runway, once you turn on to final, or you're getting close to it, then I would turn approach mode on. You could possibly do it a little bit earlier than that, just to be sure you don't miss something. But from my experience, it's interesting watching it from 8 or 9,000 feet and 80 miles out when it becomes alive. But it's really frustrating, especially for new people, if you constantly hear this glide slope is alive, Nav1 has glide slope, localizer is alive, blah blah blah, all this announcements. It's like, well, what happened? Did I lose it? Is it like not connecting right? And it's because your plane is making all of these turns on and off the path, weaving in and out, trying to turn so it can get on course again.
Yeah. And I think something else important for people to also know is, for example, I did a test flight with this to Charlotte the first time. You remember, Andy, I did a test flight.
Yep.
And it worked out perfect. Now, the thing is, I got connected before I was even fully lined up. It doesn't got to be, like, dead on before it's going to connect.
No.
I still had like 40 degrees to the right to actually be fully, lined up as far as going left and right. And, I was able to turn on my autopilot 2 and go to auto land and was connected. I mean, it worked out perfect. It was like clockwork. But you got to remember that. Don't think you got to be fully dead on before it's going to connect, because that's not true.
No, it appears to be within a certain range. So, as an example, I was looking things up. Your localizer is 2.5% wide, whatever that means. Generally,
App Start cursor.
it's 2.5% of the runway's width, so 195 feet. You're talking about 30 miles out. You're looking at maybe a span of 100 degrees from left to right. And then you want within that range.
Yeah.
And as you get closer to the airport, the range gets narrower and narrower to where it's like maybe a couple of degrees.
Mhm. I think it's really good. It's a wonderful update. I will, just add that for the record. We've been waiting for something like this, and so having that, out there now is really, really a good thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, if you use it with ATC, normally they're going to give you an intercept of about 30 degrees. You'll be 30 degrees to one side or the other, or roughly. It could be 30, it could be 40, but generally, and then it'll get it, and you'll slowly start to turn in. But yeah, that's an important point as well. Just because we've got this new system, it doesn't mean you can also engage approach mode. As soon as it says that the glide slope is alive, you still got to follow the old method of actually looking at your waypoints. Just because the glide is alive, these things are pretty powerful radio signals, but you don't try and get it like 50 miles out. It's just not going to work out. It's usually very much when you're maybe 20 miles or so out and you're looking at these final two waypoints particularly. But another thing is that people will have to play around with is the speech rate and the time interval, because it's given this info. In some cases it's going to talk a little bit more, so you might have to play around, especially if you have it on a lower time interval like 2 or 3 seconds. Maybe just increase it to like 5, or increase the speech rate if you're able to do that. It's something that the individual is just going to have to play with really and see what they enjoy, but those are adjustable values, so if it's talking too much for your liking, then you can fix it.
That's a good point, Declan. Matter of fact, I ran into that to where it was talking too much, too fast. Well, not like too fast as in the fastness of the voice, but I couldn't hear what else was going on with my reader because of the information being, delivered to me about, lining up and all that. And I'm like, I need to adjust that. So that's a good point to make. It's got to be just right, or else, especially using NVDA and stuff, because it needs to read more than that when we're flying. Even at that last, part of it, we got to watch other stuff too. And I'm like, man, I can't get it to shut up for a minute so I can look at this. But that's a good point. I'm glad you made that.
Yeah, and of course you can get it to use SAPI, which is a good feature. So you can have it on SAPI, but the thing with that is if you do have it on a small interval, like every 2 seconds, SAPI has a tendency to just read everything. So if TFM kind of gets behind on the reading, it will just keep reading and reading until it gets to the last thing. So it sometimes kind of gets spammy. So in those cases, increasing the interval will give it a bit more space between reading the figures, in which case you'll have less for SAPI to read.
Yeah, that's a good point. I need to do that myself, actually. I wasn't sure what what to change to make that better. But now you said that, now I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I think it's great for new flyers. I really do. Even those of you that are new and you might be nervous about it, I really think it's going to help you having this new system compared to the old system. I think it's going to be like day to dark in difference on helping you.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have any questions in the chat. I was going to just say to Andy, if there's anything else you want to mention about it, or of course any other sort of things that you're working on with TFM that you want to announce or speak about for the near future.
Yep.
But if you've got any questions, then obviously do those too.
I'm not seeing any questions, so you guys make sure if you got them, send them. Go ahead, Andy.
Another thing that was released in this last update, 22.5, is location of your airport's database from Make Runways. So in previous versions of TFM, it would just read it from P3D's default location, which is in P3D's main install folder. Now you have to actually identify the folder and browse to it, so TFM knows where these files are located. They can stay in P3D's main install folder if you want them to. You can move them and tell TFM where they are. But in either case, if you are going to make use of the new ILS system and some of the other things that TFM depends on airport data with, you have to tell it where you have these files located. And to do that, you would go to TFM Settings, go down to Airports Database, tab around. There's going to be a P3D file path field. You can either directly type it in or paste it in if you want, or if you're not sure how to paste it in or how to find it, that way you can press the browse button and it'll bring up a familiar folder browse window, so you can just pick it from there, and it will save from instance to instance in that particular case. That is what's in this update. Some more notable things since we've been on the podcast is that TFM is now a background application with the system tray icon. In order to get to some of the features, you have to go to the system tray icon and right click on it, and it will bring up the context menu, and it's got things like settings and about, report an issue, the website, things like that that used to be in the main user interface's main menu are now in that context menu. They're also available in the simulator, so you can press right bracket Control K to see the key assignments for those if you need a refresher on those or want to know where the new ones are. A point of interest that I found too in the beginning when we had done this, since the podcast, MCP boxes, so autopilot boxes for the PMDG 37 and 77, they're consolidated controls that are not necessarily located on the speed box of the 37 or 77. Some of the controls there are made for convenience. So an example is on the 77 series, you have the speed brake, which is a slider, and you have the auto brake, which is a series of radio buttons. Those are not on the official speed box, but I put those there for convenience sake. 77, its core API is complete as far as putting in all of the FSUIPC's offsets. So now we just have to build features around them. There's a controversy about FS 2020 support that happened recently. TFM is starting to support FS 2020, but it's more of a lag behind at this point. So whatever features we put into P3D will automatically carry over to FS 2020 because the offsets between the two simulators are the same. So you build one, it works in both.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a point where we'll have to start paying attention to specific airplanes in FS 2020, which might slow down some things in P3D when we get to that point. But it's a matter of a balancing act between the two, so that way you don't ignore one while you're working on the other one, because you want to keep a balance.
Yeah. No, just
Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, is there anything future related that is anything to expect, or I mean, if you don't have anything to announce at this moment, that's fine too. But I'm just curious, like as far as updates that maybe we've not discussed that you're looking at, or that
Grab the cat.
would be like next next time we get an update, we might see this or see that. Anything like that on the list, or
So FS 2020 support is pretty much going to be the same as it is now. Other than there may be in the settings under airport databases, there might be an FS 2020 database folder field.
to
Because the idea-
browse to that, yeah.
because in that particular case, TFM will just automatically switch back and forth between the two depending on what simulator you have loaded at the time. And you don't have to worry about it, you just tell it once where these things are and it will deal with it from there on.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
That's coming. That is coming up. And this is a preliminary. This is a preliminary. Yeah, right. A preliminary thing. I can't talk for some reason.
We're about to do the
yeah.
speech lessons podcast.
This is a before it happens thing, but earlier last week, PMDG released the 737-700 for FS 2020.
Yeah, they did.
And for the first time in the accessibility of flight simulators, TFM is actually looking at supporting it as
I've only
it
got two
is
left.
maintained,
I'll give you
instead
some of
of
this
years
for a minute.
after it was released and it's no longer being updated. So we have caught up to the developers on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna
So
say
when we know-
I was asking
when
about
we
that,
know
the
more-
737, but we don't know enough on it to talk about it as far as the
so when we
podcast.
know more about the status of especially like PC people and PMDG people and what they're going to do, then we will know what's going on. But yes, we are looking at the 737-700 for 2020.
I mean, we would love to
being
do,
maintained.
a podcast. Me and Declan would love to do a podcast on a new 737, but we don't know enough about it, and we can't fly it. So how are we going to podcast it? Someone asked, well,
Yeah, I was
when we
going to
going to
say,
talk about it. Well, what's
I know
to
someone
say?
who purchased it, and this thing is $79. So please don't purchase it and then say why isn't it working with TFM. It's not supposed to. There are differences.
It is not working yet. Just
yeah.
remember that. It is not working yet.
There's a big
Right.
reason for that, and Andy, you brought that up before. Why is, well, one, PMDG is kind of got a hold on their, what was that you was telling us? Was it the
So
FSUIPC?
PMDG has a... So the current situation is this. At some point during the 37 development cycle, FSUI people, or FSUIPC people, turned off all of the offsets for the 37 because they weren't needed. And now they've released it and they're still turned off. Because part of the reason why, I believe, is PMDG is still working on trying to finalize some things in their SDK, and they don't want people mucking around with it super serious until they give us the go-ahead to start making add-ons or overlays or whatever we need to do with it. So they have to get with FSUIPC and tell them if there's any new offsets or what they need to do. There's been talk, and I can't guarantee or promise. There has been talk about the fact that when FSUIPC turns on all of the PMDG offsets again, that you'll have the same instantly and immediately will have the same access to the 37 in 2020 as we do in P3D. Just instant, boom, they flip the switch, you install the new version of FSUI.
Oh, that'd be exciting. Yeah, possibly.
And immediate instant access to where it is right now in P3D.
If that happened, then yes, we could do a podcast on the PMDG.
Oh, we'll be doing one, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, what people got to remember is this is still... So the way the PMDG is working is in every 12 weeks they'll be releasing a new aircraft. So it's $79.95 or maybe $99, I forget, but it's pretty much $80. Let's call it $80 for the 700. And then in 12 weeks, we're expecting a similar price for the 800 when that one is released, and then the 12 weeks after there'll be another one released, and so they'll keep going until the full lineup is out. But that means that it is still in development, and still changes are being made on a pretty frequent basis. The other thing to note about this is, of course, we know that we're waiting for 2020's accessibility to improve, hopefully in 10, but honestly we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And First Officer, I said this the other week, but First Officer does support the 737 already, which is a good sign. You do have to purchase an additional, the way he's doing it is you purchase each aircraft that you would like. So you will have to purchase this particular support for this particular aircraft. But what he did put on one of his change logs was that he's trying out an all-new graphical interface for 2020. And I read this, and this certainly concerned me. I haven't had any reports yet of people trying it, and I don't blame them, to be honest. It doesn't sound that great. But yeah, so there is talk about this graphical interface, and we can only hope that it doesn't mess it up too much. But I know there was talk about TFM and a First Officer a while back, but we can only hope that for the moment First Officer doesn't mess us up too much with his graphics and his interface. But yeah, don't come to us and expect that if you buy First Officer, it's going to work with the 7.3 in terms of MVDA and reading the interface as well.
Especially when it comes to graphical, because that's usually when we run into problems. Is they'll do these updates with graphicals, and next thing we know, it went from being 70% accessible to 20%. So
yeah, we hope not. But I mean, and of course, we will report back. When someone tests it.
I mean,
but really, there's not much we can do with it right now since the 7.3 doesn't have these offsets anyway.
I've heard enough talk about First Officer with First Officer Next, how there's all this unlabeled stuff. Well, that should be a hint right there, you guys, that things are not 100% already. So because there's a lot of buttons that just don't read. It just says button, 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 button. And only one person can fix that. You bring it to us, And it's fine talking to us about it, but we can't do nothing about that.
Yeah, TFM's keeping a close eye on the first officer situation, and in the event that first officer goes so far downhill that we can't use it anymore and things like that, TFM will have to start looking at putting in first officer support for at least the PMDG stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, I hope we don't get to that point. And I should point out for P3D users that we have now got a software page on bvi.net, and we've put an old version of First Officer, the 204 trusted version. I know 205 also works, but what we wanted to do is make absolutely sure that if he puts this graphical interface into P3D, which is really what we use it for at the moment, and starts upgrading to 206 or whatever it might be, that we have an available downloadable version. So if you need that, it's always going to be available on bvi.net along with some other softwares for download. So obviously you'll still need a key. You can't just download and use it, but it is the old exe is there available. So if he decides to change this for P3D, then we have a backup plan.
Awesome.
The next interesting point that I want to make here, back in the end of last November into the middle of December, TFM put out a community survey asking about certain things. The main focus was payware aircraft versus freeware aircraft, and what specific things related to payware or freeware were people more gauged more important. And the results were interesting because out of all the people that filled out the survey, only 0.07% of the people identified as freeware being an important factor. Everyone else said payware is priority.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was an interesting thing to note, because when people talk to you and things, they'll say, oh, well, freeware is important, and it makes it look like, well, maybe we need to put freeware stuff up on top of things in the priority list. Well, somehow, for whatever reason, most people say that they want payware planes, and they're interested in payware even if they don't own one. And separation between whether people would use TFM based on freeware or payware is huge. And by all means, payware wins. And when we were asking about payware support, we asked people some questions. One of those being, rank these aircraft manufacturers in order that you want TFM to support them. They were Aerosoft in the lead, Quality Wings next, Wilco next, and FS Labs last. Now the support research that we have found with the Aerosoft and the Quality Wings, I don't know anything about the Wilco yet, but I do know for Aerosoft and Quality Wings, it is doable. It is definitely possible and guaranteeable. The Aerosoft thing, we could achieve the same quality level or better with Aerosoft, because Aerosoft identifies the beginning and the end of stages of flight. So for an example, in the SDK there is a switch that says it is ready for pre-flight checklist and all that kind of stuff. Once your pre-flight checklists are done, it will say ready for pre-flight, and you start your pre-flight flows, and it'll keep going on like that until you are done with your flight. It also has indicator markers for end of a stage flight So if you get if you get to the point where you are climbing, it'll say ready for climb. Once you get done with that stage, it'll say end of ready for climb stage.
Mm-hmm.
Ready for climb stage. And once you get done with that, it has a switch where you can identify end of climb, beginning of cruise, and it goes all the way on and on and on until you are done.
And just so you guys know, if you got questions, now would be the time to ask. If I get questions later, like me and Declan's not going to run and chase down Andy and ask questions when the opportunity's been given, even before it's
I'm
published.
going to call Andy at 3 in the morning, ask him the questions.
Like, we give you the opportunity now, and if you don't take advantage of that, unfortunately, you would just have to contact him, with the different means of contact that he has.
Yeah. So, in either case, the interesting thing about Aerosoft Airbus is 18, 19, 20, and 21 and 30. They all have the exact same SDK. So, as far as the 18 through 21, if we do one, we've done all of them all at once. It's similar to if we complete support for the PMDG 77, then all variants are finished, other than maybe one or two offsets or one or two specialty things. Same thing with the Airbuses, 18, 19, 20, and 21. If we build support for, let's say, the 21, then everything retro to the 18 is supported automatically. On the 330 is almost identical to the 18 through the 21, with the exception of a few things to deal with engines, hydraulics, fuel, because it's 4 engines instead of 2.
Right.
So support for that would most likely come pretty quick after the 18 through 21 series got done. The only thing that we have to make note on with the Airbus series is the FMC text, because we're getting the text of the FMC display through an image. And you have to OCR that image. Some of the text might be a little muddled. A prime example is on the init ref page. It says Airbus A320-200 for the title. The OCR'd version says this: Airbus A320-200. Well, based on that context, you can almost say those are all zeros and not O's. But the nice thing about it, though, too, is it has soft keys, 1 through whatever left and 1 through whatever right. I believe the main FMC screen actually has 8 soft keys on each side. But the main thing is, even if the text is somewhat muddled, there are user guides out there that explain it. Their documentation is almost precise to the point that you could imagine doing it in your mind. So there's plenty of documentation out there on what goes in 1 left or 2 right or 3 right of this particular page. So the fact that text is slightly muddled might not necessarily be as much of a concern. And if there's numbers that are put into the FMC, then TFM has direct access to those. So if, let's say, you go to the fuel page, you put in 13,000 pounds, let's say, and by the time you get it back, TFM says LQ00000, for an example, then TFM can actually report to you exactly what was entered into that field because we have direct access to the numbers.
Right. Playing with OCR, yeah.
Yep. Aside from that, PMDG support, people say that the 47 is of high priority over any other project, so the order in which it would go with PMDG stuff, finish the 77, move on to the 37, and then rewrite the 47. Once those are done, move on to Airbus.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when that happens, we'll come back and give you guys an update on it, considering we don't really have, well, we've not flown it yet, but at that point we'll get to fly it and probably have a whole lot more to discuss on it too. So
Oh yeah, it'll be super exciting to try out an Airbus. It's not something we've done before. I think what we got to remember with freeware is, in an ideal world, we would have enough staff on TFM to do freeware and payware, but it's 2 people and they have limited time. So ultimately, would we rather be flying a freeware Airbus, or would we rather have Andy and Jason spend a bit more time and get access to the quality payware one that flies just like the real thing? And I think the majority of people, whilst we want to see freeware, payware is probably the priority. I mean, out of interest,
yeah.
Are you thinking of doing these surveys like every 6 months or yearly or something, Andy, to try and gauge priority levels?
I've thought about doing like a regular one, possibly like around November, December. I might move it up a little earlier because November, December, January is kind of like 3 months worth of holidays and downtime, so that might not be a good time of the year. So possibly September, October, maybe the end of the year survey, which should focus on long term things like that. Maybe run it through December and then publish the results sometime in January or February.
Yeah.
I had thought about doing other shorter, more focused type of surveys when things come up. That might be highly debatable or might be a hot topic or something like that. There isn't anything on the plate for any short-term surveys at this point, but I'm sure some will come up at some point. When they do, they'll be posted on the main menu of the website, talkingflightmonitor.com.
Right, yeah, good to know. Out of curiosity as well, on the blog, is there any way to get email notifications when there's a new blog post published?
There isn't right now, but that doesn't mean that we can't figure out a way to put support in for it.
Okay,
So
just a random thought that occurred to me.
Let everybody know when something like that comes along.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little update on that.
Yeah, there is RSS feeds for those people who do RSS feeds. So there is that's available, but subscribe via email, not yet. We're actually still working on putting the website together. It's a fairly new website. It came over about 2 or 3 months ago. I think 18.2, TFM 18.2, when it was in alpha stages, was the first release posted on the website. So it some time ago, but not too long ago. It's not. That's the other thing too. TFM is no longer an alpha. It is official releases now. We had to decide at one point, when are we going to actually pull it out of alpha or beta or whatever testing stages and just put it into the wild and say it's a release. I'm like, well, top of the year, we can switch versioning schemes and take it out of testing phase from there. So at the turn of the year, we now follow a different versioning scheme. It is the last two letters of the year, a dot, the number of the month, like 5, and if there is anything more to get posted in that month, like hot fixes or bug fixes, then you'll have a dot in that number. So for the example, 22.5.1 is the year 2022, April for the number 5, and then 1 for one build after the initial release. So when May comes around, if there's any builds in there, it'll be 2022.6 series. So if you happen to see it go 2 months without a build and then the minor version number after the 22 jumps to, that's why. It's not in this type.
Makes sense. I don't know if we have any questions, but I can't think of anything else myself.
No, the only other thing I'm going to put out there is, because I don't know, it's been about a month. Somebody wanted to do an interview, and I'm flying, and guys, we don't do interviews. Like, if it was, like, another company, or, someone that maybe built something that we use, bringing them on here would be one thing. Like, we bring Andy on because he's a developer, right? But we don't bring, Declan doesn't bring on Marshall because Marshall's flying a 737. That doesn't really justify what we're doing on the podcast. Like, what, not that we don't care, but it's not what the podcast really.
If we brought on every individual to tell their own personal story, as much as we'd like to, we probably wouldn't get much else done, because I mean, we're a small community, but there's about 20 or 30 of us. So
and you could send us, like, if you want to send a video to me or Declan for our channels, putting something up there, that's one thing, but not here. We're going to keep it, exactly the way it's been, to put information out there that is, 100%, not other stuff. So,
yeah,
I just wanted to put that out there because it's been a question more than once. I'm like, I'm just going to go on the air and say it. Like, no.
Yeah, as another thing, I was looking at my notes here, and over the past year or so, TFM has actually gotten quite a bit of public exposure, because last summer it was actually a presentation at Flight Sim Expo, and it was also an presentation in Gaming Accessibility Conference.
Yeah. Yep.
There's nothing in the chat, by the way.
No, nothing at all. That's why I went live. I went live because I thought, well, the people ask
too good.
questions.
We've answered all their questions already.
Yeah.
They're just like, well,
they don't know what to say.
Yeah. We've stunned them into silence. But no, the presentations were good, and it's great to see getting more public exposure. I don't think they've announced the Flight Sim Expo yet for this year, but maybe they'll do one later on, if not next year. And we'll keep it the side of community updated with TFM is great. I'm sure because the more we can encourage companies to work with us, then the better. And we all know, say with the Sober and Microsoft, how we've been trying to keep up the exposure and letting them know we're still here, and we're ready to reach out to you. We just need you to help us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one of those things that, anything that's got to do with accessibility, we're willing to do whatever we can to work with people, but we're going to go halfway and meet you there, and you got to come the other half of the distance and meet us in the middle, because 2020's not been, and I'm not saying 2020 is horrible, because it's not, but we've not had a good reputation with them, or they've not had a good reputation with us, rather. It's just, they're about the money, not accessibility. On this end of it, we got P3D, we got accessibility, we got TFM. That's where the accessibility still lies. I mean, that's the cold-hearted reality of it. The next update for Microsoft, they say they're going to fix, but we've heard that for how many updates? 3?
I'll tell you what, a Sobo, come prove us wrong.
Update 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want you to prove us wrong.
Yeah,
because the PMDG's there now. And we really hope that if the offsets get enabled and things are generally in a good state with TFM, that'd be incredible. And, it'd be nice to fly it in a different sim.
You would think that Asobo and Microsoft would be like, oh, well, they got accessibility going with that. Why don't we? Because, look, we're flying this 737, 747, 777, and we've got, full accessibility, but, adding more. I think we could safely say full accessibility. We've got full accessibility, really.
You got enough to be able to fly it and do a few
but
extra things.
Asobo, what are you letting us fly at full accessibility? Show me. Or show us. Because it's not there yet. AI doesn't count. Okay, that does not count. Someone brought that up the other day, and AI doesn't count, you guys. That's not accessibility.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to fly the PMDG with AI, I don't think. So
Well, no.
I mean, really, AI is like...
Run. It actually crashed the plane 1,000 feet off the runway.
AI is not accessibility. It's like putting in... It's like me going and loading up a video and watching it. That's AI. It's just start to finish. Yeah. So, prove us wrong.
Sit back and watch.
I say what Declan does, prove us wrong.
The thing to make mention here with FS 2020 and accessibility, it's been a pretty hot topic recently with TFM, and TFM should or should not support FS 2020. We look at it this way from TFM's point of view. We're not here to judge flight models. We may have our own opinions as people, but TFM as a project or an organization is not here to judge flight models, which one is right or which one is wrong. Whether people fly with autopilot or AI or by hand, or whether or not their autopilot, technicals of their autopilot system are right or wrong, or even if physics of the world is right or wrong. If people want to fly it, then we have a goal to try and make it accessible. When people want to fly the Cessnas and the Bombardiers and stuff like that in FS 2020, if they need specialized support, TFM is interested in putting them in there, but only if there are a show of hands for people saying they want support for them. But, to dispel the myth, TFM does not judge on technicals, flight models, or anything like that. We provide accessibility to things that people want to do in terms of flying. So, Be that the case, the default planes in FS 2020, from what I've heard, they have managed autopilots. Not our place to judge, it's our place to make them accessible.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, what people have to remember is a lot of TFM actually already works in 2020. Considering it's a whole new simulator, it's pretty amazing. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get a lot of the information we get now from reading the instrumentation and things without TFM. I mean, if TFM didn't work, 2020 would be a lot worse of an experience. And, you know, hell, when PMDG, you know, is fully usable, we'll all look forward to using TFM with it in 2020. It'll be nice for people not to have to buy, you know, I mean, of course it'll still be in P3D, but if someone is new and they don't want to buy weather, and they don't want to buy all these different, you know, add-ons, time sync or whatever, they might not have to do that. But we need a Sobo to, like we said, come prove us wrong, you know, come make your menus accessible and fix your issues, because we're here and we would love to use it. Absolutely.
Yep, exactly. And you know, P3D, you can get all these different weather, and you know, there's more money involved in P3D, and I get that compared to 2020, and I think that's where the difference is between 2020 and P3D as far as, you know, what makes 2020 different. Well, that's the first thing, is a lot of, you know, the weather and all that's already there. And me and Declan both have checked out like the A320 and stuff, and they got some nice stuff over there. But we just can't fly it. We just can't. Even the newest 320 that they came out with, very nice jet, but it's still kind of a pain to fly. So I'm not going to bang my head against the wall when I can fly on P3D without doing that. So, but yeah, no questions or anything. So,
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think we've covered everything.
maybe another 3-4 months we'll have Andy back with some new stuff. I mean, again, I understand, Declan understands, Marshall, all of us, we understand that it takes time to update stuff, and you know, we also understand that TFM is freeware. So it's all about doing it on their free time. So, we appreciate what you do, Andy. And keep up the good work, man. 'Cause it's we've came a long way. If you look at where we started and where we are now, we have came a long ways. That's why I hope that
It is a long way, yeah.
the next show, hopefully I can...
1.3 compared to 22.5.
I'm hoping the next Sim Expo I can figure out when that's going to be and get us a good presentation put together and go there and represent represent it in a good way. And me and Declan's talked about it, and
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
but I don't know when that's going to be, so I can't say. I don't want to say because I don't know. I don't well, you said this or that. Well, I don't know. So when we find out, then we'll keep you guys updated.
Yep. And one of the last hot topics I will bring up is that when TFM goes on break, and there is nothing for 2, 3, 4 months at a time, even though we're around, does not mean that TFM has abandoned itself, or that we stopped working on it, or that there's some big huge feature coming out. There may be, there may not be, but like John said, we're doing this on our own free time, and we have other things that we need to do that pay the bills and is reality in real life. And TFM is reality for sure, but everyday life gets in the way, work gets in the way, family things come up, other social events come up, whatever. So there may be breaks where TFM doesn't do anything for 1 or 2 months. That's probably why. And the blog, hopefully, is to clear some of that stuff up, because we can announce when we're going on break, and if there's an extended period of downtime, put a blog post up there every once in a while giving people an update on what's going on. But I'm sure people are interested in, some parts of our lives other than just what's going on with TFM. So, yeah. We don't put it in the background, but we have other things to do at the same time.
Good deal. Wendy, it's really nice having you on the show, man. Me and Declan really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us everything about, TFM and newest updates. I'm really glad to see this update roll out. I know Declan is too. We've talked about it. We've talked about it a million
you'll
times.
have fun flying it. Like I said on WhatsApp, I actually thought of you when I was making it.
Yeah, the ham flying thing is awesome. It's a whole new dimension. I really love that part, yeah.
Yeah. So if people want to get a hold of us at TFM, the website is Talking Flight Monitor. Monitor, M as in Mary, O, N as in Nancy, ITOR.com. TalkingFlightMonitor.com is the homepage. You'll find the blog up there in the top menu. Downloads are also in the top menu. We have a contact us form if you're on the website and have something quick you want to ask or send to us. Contact, fill out the form, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you need to send us an email directly, because it's the best way, info, I-N-F-O, at talkingflightmonitor.com, I-N-F-O, at talkingflightmonitor.com. We also have our GitHub, which at some point will be on the website. Don't forget to look at the demo video that's on the homepage. And we shall talk to you guys later.
Very cool. And let me give you guys its phone number. No, I'm kidding.
No,
I'm kidding.
111. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, man.
That's great. Alright, well, thanks very much for coming on, Andy. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all in the next podcast, whenever it may be. Stay tuned on at BVI Pilots on Twitter, bvipilotspodcast@gmail.com, and of course, you can email us at the usual places. Mine is blindflightsimmer44@gmail.com. You can comment on any of the videos that me or Johnny put out on our channels, and we'll usually pick that up too. So there's so many ways you can communicate. But till the next time, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys later.
Thanks.
See ya.
Alright, nice.
Alright, don't get rid of that stream, Johnny, in case multiple networks or anything. If I want to dub from, let's say my network drops out and I know yours doesn't, don't get rid of that stream, alright?
Gotcha.
Very important.
Stop recording.